All right, me. It is November 21st, and I've just finished reading Arthur Conan Doyle's Hound of Baskervilles, um, which is one of the later publications of Arthur Conan Doyle's for Sherlock Holmes, if I remember correctly. But I think, because there's like the four major ones, and I think this is the third out of the four, but I don't remember correctly. Anyways, I read it because I am planning on teaching it for my English 4 class. We have Thanksgiving break coming up here in about a week, and then we have 1 week of regular classes, and then finals. So, like, what are we doing with that 1 week? So I thought this was a nice kind of wrap up, hopefully a little more fun. I'll talk about all my books that I taught at some future point, but that's that. The difficult thing about reading this book is that this is the first time I can really recall that I read a full book and was trying to figure out questions and things to ask for it while I was reading it. The other books that I've taught, either I have read them before, so I have a basic understanding of what's happening, or I read them fully and then started designing questions afterwards through a second read. I, with the time that we have, decided that I was just going to go for it. And so, especially for a mystery, it was very, very interesting that I had to think many, many steps ahead of how this was going to work out, and guide kids to thinking in a very specific way and think about author's choice, while also not knowing where this ends up in the first place. Although, pretty early on I was correct, and hopefully I've guided them enough to get where they need to be. But we will see in about 2 weeks. So that's that. Yeah. The book itself is I can see why it's one of the more favored and generally considered one of the strongest Sherlock Holmes pieces, because it is so nice in terms of like the weekly aspect of the releases and everything, right? Because if I remember correctly, this is another piece, much like the Jules Verne piece, and I believe like the other Sherlock Holmes pieces, that is being released chapter by chapter by chapter in a newspaper. And so you're kind of having to deal with this idea that your audience has to be able to read this, understand key points, and then be wanting to read the next week, right? And so, for 15 weeks, or for 4 months, right, you're reading this chapter by chapter by chapter. So yeah, that's all good. Now, I don't remember, I only have a vague recollection of the first two Sherlock Holmes pieces I read, because I did read them while I was working overnight at camp, I think. At least one of them I read for a class, and then one of them I read at camp. Is how much of this is written from Watson's perspective, right? And it's not because like I know and I understand that the way that this was initially written has always been that it is it is Watson's diary or retelling of the story. But from what I remember from the other pieces versus this one, is that this one is almost entirely Watson doing the investigating, and Sherlock Holmes doesn't appear for most of it, right? And so in that case, right, you're looking at a very, very interesting thing in which you're your most popular character and your most, your most important character, the titular character, just doesn't exist within the novel, or the novella, right? Which is, it's a fascinating thing to do, and it's really, really interesting to do. And I wish more books did it, much like the other series I'm reading in the middle of this, because I'm reading this in the middle of the Tunnel series, which is a whole other issue on its own. But yeah, it's a fun book. It's quick. There's not a lot to say about it, I don't think. Mostly because I think that I've talked about this with other detective pieces before, but like, we get so rehashed. There's only so many ways that you can do this kind of detective story, and it becomes a formula, right? And there's only so many things that you can do within the formula. And so, whether it be kind of like the dystopian novels, or whether like the dystopian teenage novels, or whether it be mysteries or things like that, right? There's only so much that you can do, and then you just start changing names, and changing places and things. And this is one of them, right? Of where the concepts that are from here get taken out in so many other places that you go back and you read this and go, oh, this is just basic technical novel, right? But it is so groundbreaking and so wonderful for its time, right? And that's the struggle that we constantly deal with in terms of literature and things, is that so much of this is for its time. So that's that. The other thing, part of the reason why I am choosing to do this specific book is that it actually weirdly connects to pretty much everything else we've done so far in this semester for my English 4 class. It's inherently a Faustian tale, which goes in line with Picture of Dorian Gray, right? Of where you have Baskerville supposedly sold his soul to get the woman that he wanted to marry, and then it all goes awry. And so, right, that's just a Faustian tale that sets up the entire piece. You have some Beowulf in there, which is, the concepts of the Moors, and that you have this horrible, horrific monster that is just going to destroy everything, living in this swampland area that is difficult to traverse. And so there's no way to go and kill it, because number one, it's so monstrous, it's such a beast that you can't kill it. But then also, to go hunt for it is to go and be in the moor and the swamp, right? And this is a theory about horror that and about human fears that I don't know if it's expressed anywhere in a more clear fashion, but a lot of it comes down to the idea that one of the things that is inherent in human fear is that we are immediately afraid and scared of places where it's difficult to get out of, right? And so that that includes claustrophobia and things like that, but then it also includes things like why people tend to think of basements or the top floor of something as generally the most haunted place in a building. That's where you get the most supernatural phenomena, right? And it's because that's the place that's hardest to get out of, right? There's an inherent fear that exists there, and the same goes for the concept of the moor, right? It's this big wide open space, but then also you can't move quickly, you can't run quickly, so you have this inherent fear of being in darkness in an open field, right? Which is already trigger something in the human mind that says you shouldn't be here, right? There's nowhere for you to go. But then also, now you're doing this when you can't move, and it's difficult to move, and it's dangerous to move. So all that being said, right, it kind of goes along the line of the whole Beowulf aspect of things and the horror aspect of that exists there. And then even Macbeth, right? You have the concepts of lying and deception and murder for power, and then everything going wrong and needing to kill more people to get what you want, right? So that's all that. Even Modest Proposal, it kind of has a little bit of Modest Proposal in it, right? Of where the cure is worse than the disease, right? Of they effectively have to almost kill the actual heir, Henry Baskerville, to then kill the Hound, right? and to catch James Stapleton in his actual lie, and him being the actual one responsible. Yeah, right. That has a little bit of Modest Proposal in it, but yeah, that's Conan Doyle's Hound of the Baskervilles. I mean, fun. It's wonderful. It's Sherlock Holmes. So you can't really go wrong.
Yes, got all the house.